But not to be outdone, it's not fun just to have a steam engine on a train, a rail thing. You also want to have it on a what? You want to go boating, right? I want to have it on a boat. I want to have those giant wheels in the back so I can go skiing at a very slow pace, right? French engineers completed the first steamship in the 1770s with a steam engine. So the French developed the first steamship in the 1770s. But the first commercial steamboat was made by American Robert Fulton, the Claremont you see right here, with the giant spinning riverboat wheels.
Wait, what's the difference between the first and that one?
This is a commercial use one, like by people or by products, whatever the case is. So while they made the first steamboat, how reliable was it, kind of thing, right? How good was it? So the steamship brought the same advantages of railroads. They were speedy, reliable, and efficient. Like now you can travel upstream. That's a huge deal. You can travel upstream now without having to work against this or that. So big change, big impact. But yeah, America got that one. All right, industry and population. Industry and population. This is going to kind of mix some things we talked about before too. So basically, Britain dominates, again, figure this out, dominates the early industrial revolution. While other countries will begin to adapt to it, like France, Germany, and America, they're nowhere near the same levels as Britain. So Britain is by far the most dominant industrialized country from like the late 1700s until about 1850 or so. In 1851, London will host an industrial fair called the Great Exhibition in the newly created Crystal Palace. So here's a picture of the Crystal Palace. You can see it here, 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 here. It was this giant wrought iron building they built with a bunch of glass panes. But they built it kind of for this demonstration of all their efforts. So they built it for this demonstration of all the technologies and things they had been creating. So it kind of looks like a giant mall almost. Or museum, I guess, too. So you might see this referred to as either way. Sometimes it's called the Great Exhibition of 1851 or the Crystal Palace Exhibition. Either way, it's the same thing.
What is it? It's just a building to show
The Crystal Palace is a building, but they use it as a way to show off all these technologies and inventions of Britain at the time. So basically, it becomes the first what? The first World's Fair, right? It's like the first World's Fair. So in 1851, London hosted this industrial fair called the Great Exhibition in the Crystal Palace. Over 6 million European visitors came to see it. So over 6 million Europeans came to visit the Crystal Palace in London. But the building itself is kind of a testament to like industrialization because it's now made out of glass and this iron, which are all cheap now because of industrialization. But being able to shape the iron in a way to be able to have this giant glass building was impressive. So the building itself was an impressive feature for the time, let alone the things inside of it.
Are those all just
Those are the writer paintings. That's a picture of it later on the left.
So is it still around?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
You just didn't have like any new pictures to see what it looks like.
I don't want to do a new picture. I want to do the old picture. I want to see what it looked like then.
Picture? Posterity. Picture?
Now we have pictures. Now we're transitioning to pictures now. What is that?
You say it like picture instead of picture.
Picture?
Like a picture of water.
Okay.
You say it so confidently. I'm like,
All right. So this was also sponsored by the British royal family. So the British royal family, under Queen Victoria, sponsored the Great Exhibition. So it celebrated this new era of industrialization in Britain and its role as a world economic leader. So this is like Britain's century, like kind of the last century in the century, Britain's century, right? They were,
they were thriving.
Yeah, thriving. They're showing off everything else. They had this giant empire until their child usurps them.
Oh, by 1851. Oh, you're not, okay.
In that century.
Yeah.
Right. We don't really come into the scene as being big until about World War I. And then we're like...
Yeah, because we went through a whole region.
Well, at this point, we're struggling with Civil War and the aftermath, right, by this point? Yeah, we're not. That's like 70s, 80s, and stuff. Yeah. All right. Britain's production. So Britain's claim to be the workshop of the world was no boast. Because it produced 2/3 of the world's coal. That should think about Britain, this little island, produced 2/3 of the world's coal. Just shows you how impactful industrialization can be.
That's what I say yesterday. Like they're literally the size of like one of our stadiums.
Right. And think about how powerful they became and how influential they were. Like this is the period where like the sun never sets on the British Empire, right? At this point, in the 1800s. Over half of the world's iron and cotton also came from Britain. Over half of all iron and cotton came from Great Britain. Cotton cloth. Because where did they get a lot of their cotton from at this point? It was not colonies anymore. The southern U.S., right? Which is why the South thought we can leave the Union and go fight the Civil War because the British are going to buy our cotton. By 1860, I'm sorry, no, I didn't say this yet. By 1860, Britain produced 20% of the entire world's output of industrial goods. By 1860, Britain produced 20% of the entire world's output of industrial goods. Their GNP rose 4 times, basically between 1750 and 1850. So between 1750 and 1850, their GNP, it's GNP, gross national product. Yeah. GNP. Yeah. GDP.
He said in.
I said in.
He said him because I wrote
GNP.
in. Okay. Gross net.
Gross national. Their population also boomed as a result too. So in 1780 they had a population of 9 million. And then in 1851 they had 21 million. So they have 9 million in 1750 and 21 million in 1851. So they have a big population boom in that time frame as well. So everybody's confident, lots of food being produced, lots of goods being produced, lots of jobs being available, big population boom. But that creates some worries. So let's talk about British population growth. Yeah, because I did it last year. Now we do it this year, 2020. You can't leave this year without talking about it. There you go. All right, so rapid population growth in Britain was key to industrial development because that's more workers, right? So rapid population growth in Britain was key to industrial development. More people meant a more mobile labor force with many young children, young people who need to work and can move.
They needed it.
They needed it, exactly.
They needed homes.
They needed homes. We'll provide it for them. The population increase was sustained with advances in agricultural and industry production. So the population increase was sustained with advances in agricultural and industry production. So the population increase was sustained with advances in agricultural and industrial production. So we know now, the fear was at the time that basically population would get so massive that it would outproduce food and available products. But basically, more people meant also better production of food and machines as well, so it kept pace. Due to lessons from history, many people at the time thought the rapid population growth would lead to disaster, which leads us to your old friend, Thomas Malthus, in his essay on the principle of population. Malthus examined the dynamics of human populations in his essay. So he examines the dynamics of human population. You don't have to really know the title of the work. You just really know, so you don't have the whole title. It's fine. Given limited resources available, he concluded the only hope of warding off such positive checks to population growth as famine and disease was prudent restraint. So if you had disease or war, that would of course help reduce your population or famine. But there's other ways you could do prudent restraint to help check population. Basically, what he wanted was people to wait till later to have kids, marry later, have kids later. That way, basically, you can't have as many kids. So get married later, have fewer kids, help check population.
So to stop people from dying from things, they have to stop people from living first.
Correct. You can't die, you can't overpopulate if you're never born. Whoa, exactly. But he wasn't very optimistic about the possibility. So while he didn't argue for like government controls or whatever, but basically he felt like people need to be more restrained in having children and like reducing population. But he didn't have much faith in that actually happening, especially for lower classes.
Didn't China lift
Their ban?
their law on,
I don't think so.
they still have the 2 kid rule?
That was one kid.
Yeah, it's still
Okay, well.